I'm not sure I really understand exactly what's going on here, but anyway. In this episode, I'll be taking a breather from the saddle for a couple of days to tackle the towering marvel of Machu Picchu before hitting the road once again for the last of Peru and the start of my epic journey south. I've chosen Ollantaytambo as my launching pad for Machu Picchu. From here, if you're not inclined to hike, the only way forward is by train. So like a pilgrim in sensible shoes, I board the local rolling stock, joining a gaggle of fellow tourists as we rattle through the final stretches of the Sacred Valley. "90 minutes later, the train unceremoniously deposits me in Aguas Calientes, a tourist base camp precision engineered for one purpose: extracting money from would-be pilgrims. Here, the concept of exit through the gift shop has been taken to its extreme. I spend a good 15 minutes navigating a maze of artisanal knitwear and ceramic llamas before finally emerging, dazed but intact, into the daylight. Aguas Calientes, or Machu Picchu Pueblo, as a seemingly unsuccessful rebrand now tries to suggest, is pretty much what you'd expect from a one-trick town. Imagine the movie Casablanca, but with fewer Bogarts and more alpaca hats. Here, a cross-section of humanity gathers, biding their time and awaiting their turn to ascend the famous peak, by bus of course. And this is after having previously played a bizarre game of Peruvian musical chairs as part of a local ritual to secure an entry ticket. Next morning, it's my turn to join the human tide as it surges towards the summit. A surprisingly well-organised affair as everyone herded onto buses with military precision and each group dispatched at their appointed hour. Once aboard, the real adventure begins, a 15-minute ride that feels like a theme park attraction, minus the safety regulations. The local drivers, apparently unfazed by the laws of physics, hurl their buses around 13 hairpin bends on a gravel road that boasts a concerning lack of barriers and an even more concerning drop-off. But the reward is without question worth the mild heart attack. Back in Ollantaytambo, it's day 40 and time to bid farewell to the Sacred Valley and the wonderfully friendly and eccentric Sacred Inca Ollanta Hotel. I owe a particular debt of gratitude to Carl, the hotel's German owner and a fellow biker. His hospitality has been impeccable, but more importantly, he safeguarded my bike and bags while I launched my assault on Machu Picchu.
Great, thank you so much again.
Okay,
yeah,
have a nice trip.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, and yeah, thanks again. And yeah, cool. Cheers. Bye bye.
With a thumbs up from Carl, I'm now pointed southward for the long journey to Ushuaia, where the neighbours are Antarctic penguins, and the road finally gives up the ghost as it runs out of planet. As I roll out of Ollantaytambo, I'm pleased to find that yesterday's glorious spring weather has decided to linger. Today's ride is a relatively short one, retracing my way through the Sacred Valley and ultimately on to Cusco. but it's not without a couple of intriguing stops along the way. After the logistical gymnastics involved in reaching Machu Picchu, it's an immense relief to be back in the saddle, where life is reduced to its simplest form: the open road, the hum of the engine, and the world unfolding 1K at a time. Port of call is the Cochahuasai Animal Sanctuary, a noble outpost of faunal compassion tucked into the Peruvian landscape. This non-profit haven offers salvation to local wildlife, rescuing and rehabilitating creatures that have felt the sharp end of human carelessness. Although the sanctuary tends to a diverse cast of animals, the real stars of the show are the birds, with a spotlight on the Andean condor, nature's heavyweight champion of the skies. They're the largest flying bird on Earth, and there's quite a bit of awe in seeing such a creature up close. Reaching the outskirts of Cusco, I've got one last stop before hitting tonight's hotel. But despite it being a stone's throw from the city, Garmin, with its usual flair for mischief, decides that the best route to my stop is a bewildering mix of narrow back streets and crowded city thoroughfares. Although by now I'm accustomed to its eccentricities, it still feels a little tedious at this point in the day. The final stop of the day is something of an oddball, a sort of eccentric outlier that jumped out at me on the map, so I thought, why not? A steep gravel track to the summit puts what's left of my day's energy reserves well and truly to the test. But once at the top, any grumbling fades. The views are more than worth the effort. I'm not quite sure what to make of Area 21, a place that feels like it can't quite decide whether it's channeling Incan mysticism or warning us of an impending alien invasion. They even have a copyright-safe Stargate, so I figure I'll give it a whirl. After all, when life hands you a knockoff portal to another world, the only reasonable response is to step through and see what happens. Alas, no cosmic voyage awaits me this time round. Instead, I'm deposited unceremoniously back on Earth, more specifically back on the road to my hotel in central Cusco. Day 41 and I'm back on the road, continuing my southbound ride. The overall plan is to make for the shimmering expanse of Lake Titicaca, then on to the Bolivian border and beyond. But southern Peru, with its endless landscapes and unpredictable roads, doesn't surrender its distance easily, so it will be a couple of days yet before the weary border ritual commences once again. Cusco, like so many of Peru's big cities, is a charmingly preserved gem, ringed by an inevitable urban sprawl. As ever, Garmin, that electronic oracle with a talent for turning clarity into chaos, takes me on a scenic tour of dead ends and dubious alleyways before finally admitting defeat and spitting me back out onto the main highway. Before I venture too far, I've penciled in a brief pause to admire the unusual ruins of Rumicolca. Built a good 1,000 years ago by a pre-Incan civilization, the Wari, the true purpose of the structure is the subject of some debate. At first glance, it looks like a ceremonial gateway, as though the Wari were ushering visitors into their world with a grand flourish. But more recent evidence hints that it may have also been a clever aqueduct, raised high to let water flow above, while the world carried on through underneath. I press on with my journey, with the sky overhead turning sombre, as if it disapproves of my progress, while the vigilant eyes of the local constabulary keep a beady gaze on my progress. The approach to the toll booth may offer opportunities for commerce, but the booth itself has seen better days. One of a spate I've observed which look as though they've been on the losing side of a negotiation with the locals. The landscape, with its modest mountains and gentle stretches of farmland, has a kind of pastoral calm that belies the reality of our altitude. We're now cruising at over 3,800 metres. And as Ewan McGregor would undoubtedly remind us if this was another long way, it all does look a bit like Scotland. stop for the night is Ayaviri, a town that can be best described as unambitious, selected more for its geographical convenience than for any inherent charm. However, reaching my hotel proves a test of patience, as I'm forced to wind through a maze of narrow back streets that seem designed to wear down the spirit. By this hour, the novelty of getting lost in a random town has long since worn off. Turns out, the well-regarded hotel I planned to stay at isn't open today. So it's back into town to my far less salubrious backup option.
Don't give up, I know you can fly, got a soul in the sky above. Don't give up, I know you can fly, got a soul in the sky above.
The day greets me with bright sunshine, as if to compensate for the unfortunate dullness of Ayaviri. With a cheerful adios to its unremarkable streets, I set my sights on Lake Titicaca. Tonight will cap my last day in Peru, and the looming presence of the lake feels like a fittingly grand finale. Soothed into a state of sun-kissed serenity by the stark beauty of the landscape, I find myself naturally drifting into place behind the car as we approach the toll booth. It takes a moment for my brain to snap back to reality. I'm on a motorcycle, and in Peru, indignities such as tolls are reserved for the four-wheeled rabble.
I gotta tell you what I feel inside. I feel so good.
My extended exposure to the thin air up here should, by all accounts, have me gasping like a landed fish, but despite cruising at nearly 3,900 metres, I seem to have somehow sidestepped the usual high altitude hangover.
So good to be alive. So good to be alive. So good to be alive. So good to be alive.
Eventually, the bucolic bliss of the countryside surrenders to the creeping sprawl of yet another city's fringes, this time the unmistakable outskirts of Juliaca.
I got nothing left to fear. No, there isn't any other way. I got breath in my lungs, my blood pumping strong.
The traffic is a little more robust than I've had to deal with in recent memory, but soon enough I'm spat out the other side and onto a road which leaves me wondering whether this is the extent of what passes for a highway around here. Fortunately, my fears prove unfounded, and I soon find myself enjoying another experience I haven't had for a while, a genuine multi-lane highway.
I feel so good to be alive. So good to be alive.
I've barely shaken off the dust of Juliaca before the outskirts of its sister city Puno loom into view, as if the two are locked in some silent contest to see who can sprawl further. But I won't be lingering here, instead foregoing the larger metropolis in favour of the more intimate charms of Chucuito. Nestled on the shores of Lake Titicaca, this quaint little town promises a more fitting haven for my penultimate night in Peru. Before calling it a day, there's one final stop, the bizarre archaeological site of Inca Oyo. It's the sort of place that leaves you questioning whether ancient civilizations had a sense of humour, or it's all just been conjured from the fevered dreams of a South American surrealist. Dating back to Incan times, the site is thought to have been a temple dedicated to fertility rituals, though how they arrived at that conclusion is anyone's guess. thankfully, is just a short hop from the world of stone phalluses to my hotel. I'm more than ready to unwind by the lake, soaking in the tranquility of Titicaca's shores before tomorrow's adventure begins, the Bolivian border, where relaxation is unlikely to be on the agenda. Detours. More detours. Border crossings. Tight squeezes. Stone dudes. Bolivian traffic. River crossings. And the road of death.